Welcome to the Moriah Nightly News on this Friday evening edition, July 17th, 2026. From the nation to Moriah, here are tonight's top stories. The president gave an unexpected election speech Thursday evening. Unexpected for me, at least. I don't know if it was for any of those listening or watching. But in the speech, the president highlighted vulnerabilities in U.S. election systems and noted Chinese interference in the 2020 election in particular, all the way up to the present day, and a reference to the deep state or deep state operatives in intelligence agencies that attempted to cover up the election meddling. And in the speech, he called upon the DOJ, that's the Department of Justice, and the Department of Homeland Security to investigate these election issues. The speech lasted about 30 minutes and was not picked up by NBC, ABC, or CNN. And in response, the president threatened to revoke NBC and ABC's FCC license, saying that they had more or less ripped off or had gotten them without cost or for free, and therefore should have them revoked for not hearing the speech, and mentioned the media being corrupt in that speech as well. The Associated Press, in trying to verify or somewhat corroborate the claims that were made in the speech, said that it was not really a challenge to anything that was not already public information, noting that for years China has attempted to more or less undermine, if you will, American elections, that they have been attempting to influence American elections, the same for Russia, and that in trying to peek at the documents that were released on the White House website, although my computer would not cooperate with those, they did seem to fall in line with the Associated Press's reporting. The perhaps concerning thing about this was that the media outlets did not pick it up and attempted to censor that speech or censor that information from the public in general on the national stage like that, when presidential speeches are usually national public events. Democrats, of course, called the speech and the claims bogus, but I do think the more concerning issue there is the media's attempt to quash the president from speaking. Regardless of your views on the president, freedom of speech should be respected across the board for anyone, regardless of political party. With all of that happening Thursday night, the Iran war had picked up on Tuesday or earlier in the week, noting that the president had said that he would not only resume the blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, but would also attempt to bring the Strait of Hormuz under American control, as it appears that the Strait of Hormuz is now taking center stage in the conflict, perhaps more so than nuclear weapons, although certainly not meant to distract from that by any means, but to say that it has dominated the headlines perhaps more so than the nuclear issue. In response this week, the U.S. Air Force has been hitting key infrastructure targets like energy sites, bridges, and key Iranian water ports in the primarily what it looked like from the Wall Street Journal and others in the southern region of Iran, pretty much across the board reporting on that. So what it appears is that the war is now back on after last week's comments while the president was in Turkey, calling it scum and realizing that he could not win on the negotiating table. The oil prices remain in the headlines, but it is interesting to note that Iraq is being heavily pursued by oil companies for those pipelines. All of that still is going on at this time. And those are expected to be online by next year, as we had previously reported in this broadcast, to note that in the midst of the conflict. In Lebanon, Israel, after U.S. mediated talks, has agreed to pilot zones where they are looking to withdraw troops from those areas of Lebanon in exchange for Hezbollah disarmament. That is to say that they can, if what it appears to be is a conditional arrangement, that if Hezbollah can meet those, or excuse me, if the Lebanese army can meet those stipulations of being able to disarm Hezbollah, and the Israelis will withdraw from that region, and all of that will be monitored as well. Significant pick up something from that part of the conflict, as that had been a bargaining tool used by the Iranians, and clever on their part, but the president wisened up. The wildfire smoke across the United States has even here in our region, has caused very cloudy views, I might add, very hazy views out there. As far to the Midwest of Chicago and down to New York City had been feeling the haze, and there was quite a picture on the front page of the Wall Street Journal this week showing that the EPA had downgraded the air quality to hazardous for the particles that can be inhaled, or the smoke and its effects on your eyes in terms of those, whatever the particles in that smoke would be. But in any case, that is significant for us here, because we had seen over the last few days a good amount of hazy skies, and that was not because of an overcast sky. It was because of wildfire smoke. And as Smokey would say, only you can prevent forest fires. But the top story in our region this week was the Ticonderoga BESS committee meeting, and that is why we did not go on the air here on Wednesday, to be sure that we could not only cover the event in the room, but also put it up as soon as possible for you, the viewers. The main headline was the notes under discussion by the committee, which was the litigation and the possibilities of litigation, which tended to take center stage in the room. What was also noteworthy was one comment that with battery energy storage coming to Ticonderoga, that it would possibly expand the capacity for solar panels in Ticonderoga, because of course the storage system would store the power generated by the panels. The mention of the lawsuits happened in coordination with those from other towns as the discussion followed, and where developers had sued the communities, and then for either passing zoning laws, or you had landowners suing the companies as well. So it very well could get messy in terms of lawsuits. That was the reports of the committee, but it appeared that you had a good deal who had more knowledge than others, with one member saying that he knew nothing about it at all, and others, like their legal expert, seeming to have a good grasp of the law in terms of environmental law on the federal level being strict, and good sense there that in federal court it could easily get struck down simply on environmental grounds. The fire chief on the committee, and again, the names were difficult to follow in the footage simply because of the fact that there were no real nameplates, but do what we can do there. He noted that he was keeping an open mind, and just to give some level of where the committee is at in terms of BESS and the issues that when the discussion that happened in the room on Wednesday. What remains is the narrative of doing due diligence in terms of following the committee course of research and trying to make sure that all of the research is in place in terms of if this were to ever go to court, seems to be still the narrative perpetuated by Supervisor Jim O'Brien, who is also on the committee. And I will leave it there to say that there are still a great deal of questions on the matter that even I do not understand with what's going on and what they're trying to either not say, hide, or what have you, but questions galore that you, the viewers, should be left to draw your own conclusions based on the information, as good journalism should tell. But sometimes a spade can be a spade, either way. The other meeting this week was the town of Moriah holding its monthly town board meeting last night in the Moriah Courthouse here in Port Henry, or the town of Moriah Courthouse here in Port Henry. The items of significance on the agenda there included 2 development plans, a comprehensive development plan and an economic development plan that would be determined by the public. Town Supervisor Matt Brassard indicated upon asking for clarification that these plans are simply in the, no pun intended, in the planning phases, and that they are looking for public input on how to move forward in terms of a comprehensive vision for Moriah and as well as a plan for economic development. The last time these plans were looked at was in the early 2000s, in that time frame, and so here in 2026, the town leadership feels it's time to update and revise those plans according to where we are today as opposed to back then. An update was given originally supposed to be in the supervisor's report, but it was asked by the public on the NY Forward grant and what is going on there. Recall that is that $4.5 million grant from New York State that the town received for projects, be that public. Really, what is economic development projects is where the town is looking to put that money as they are looking for input from not only business leaders, but also residents of the town of Moriah. Supervisor Brassard announced that on August 5th at the Port Henry Knights of Columbus, there is an open house to discuss that grant with those from New York State and others involved with the project, and they are looking again for public input on where you would like to see that money go. It is hoped by leadership here locally that that money will revamp and revitalize the town's economy and bring it back to its former heyday once again. And of significance also was a question towards the end of the meeting on the hydro plant, or the proposed hydro plant that has been proposed for many years up in Mineville. The proposed site would be in the area of Joyce Road, where the Don B shaft and others of those would be. For those of you who know Moriah's mining history, would be behind the transfer station in that part of town up that way. Um, Brassard did indicate that he had a meeting with the IDAs, the New York State, and the developer recently, but that it is still held up in the process. That would be a developing story as it is still up in the air, but there is a potential for a public hearing sometime in August, though that is still to be determined at this point. In any case, it is significant for the energy debate here and what will take place going forward. And finally, tonight, the Essex County Fair, as I not my shirt on for this, but they had a press release this past week indicating that they are improving the grandstand. They are making improvements to the grandstand area up at the fairgrounds to make that handicap accessible and bring it in accordance with the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. They are currently asking the public for donations to meet a requirement for a $5,000 matching program for this was a grant through Cloud Splitter that would help offset a part of that cost, with the other part being kicked in by the New York State Horse Breeding Development Fund, involved in the project and the preservation of that historic landmark, with the horse breeding being a part of that, simply because of the racetrack there and the history with harness racing, as it is, as Denny Westover indicated at one point in time, a very much prime location for those still in harness racing. Harness racing will be at the fair as we build anticipation for the 177th Essex County Fair here in 2 weeks. They will be at the fair on opening day at noon to see that historic event, and the ATV drag races follow that evening. As recall, we had said it would be very motorsports heavy, with a good deal of tractor pulls, truck pulls, and other events throughout the week to fill out the motorsports section of the event. The Demolition Derby will run, of course, on Sunday, as it always does, and not to mention the various music attractions that we had advertised here as well over the past couple of weeks. And as I have stated many times on this broadcast by now, and I don't think I made it clear the other night in my appreciation post for the Fair Board, they are an all volunteer board that runs the fair, or really, I shouldn't say runs it, but they organize the fair every year and coordinate with businesses to get sponsors and everything that you see, including that grant money and all of that. And that is an incredible, I can tell you, an incredible amount of work behind the scenes that goes into making the fair happen each year. So again, we want to thank the Essex County Fair Board, and we look forward with anticipation to that event, and we will be there in Floral Hall as well, and those details are forthcoming, but we are looking forward to being there and supporting the fair and the community. And with that, we will be back here on Monday. I do want to thank you for watching, and be sure to like, subscribe, share on Facebook, and be sure to have a good weekend, whether there is wildfire smoke or not this weekend. I do hope you will enjoy it. So that is the Moriah Nightly News for this evening and for this week. Have a good night.